Hey, everybody, what's good? Welcome to the Irish Breakdown Podcast. I'm Vince D'Addario. That's Brian Driscoll, and we are back for yet another, yes, I said another, Friday free-for-all mailbag, and I'm pumped up about it because it's the best day of the week. The best part about it is Brian never knows what I'm going to say, and I think that's the best part about the Friday free-for-all mailbag. Anyway, let's just jump right into it.
That's
Brian.
the best part?
Well, no, it's not the best part. Thanks for calling me on that.
I mean, I'm just saying.
It's not the
I think
best
there's
part
lots of other best parts than that.
I just like to see you laugh. I like making you laugh. What can I say?
Well, that one was like, we just got done talking about the ums and ahs, and you're like,
So, how about we just jump into some questions, Brian?
Let's do it.
What do you
Let's
think?
do it.
What do you
Big
think?
weekend, though, Vince. I mean, that's
It's a
the
huge
cool. It's a huge weekend. Football. We got some football we're going to get to see. Got some recruiting. Several 5-star players going to be on campus this weekend. So yeah, it's
well, and there's a ton of information over at irishbreakdown.com too, where you guys outline everybody that's going to be there, what it means, and I think. Did you post the film breakdown of those guys?
Not yet. That'll be up later this afternoon.
So that's coming up later this afternoon.
Had some family emergency stuff come up last night that kind of took some precedence over that, but that'll get up later this afternoon. No question about it.
Absolutely. So make sure you guys check out irishbreakdown.com because there's all kinds of good stuff out there previewing the weekend and everything that is what it is. Frankly, there's a great Drew Prine article. I know you posted that yesterday.
Yeah,
I just kind of want to pub that one. Just what this day could mean for him and how he can go about making it work best for him and all of that. And I think it was a really good article, and I highly
needs to show
people to check that one out too. So
let's get to some questions.
Let's do it. All right, right at the top. Here we go. JoJo, he says.
JoJo had a mess of super chats too, didn't he?
Yeah, he absolutely did. So
he had like 3 of them, I think. So thank you, JoJo. Appreciate that.
Chats. Thanks, JoJo.
Very, very much.
Saw Coach Freeman's interview inside the garage. How can't any parent and recruit not play for him? He's genuine, likable, and driven. The future is bright. Multiple championships. He says multiple chips in the horizon. See, I'm hungry, so that means something different to me right now. But you know what?
I know the feeling.
Well, what you say, JoJo, is absolutely on point because even the first time I heard him talk in an interview setting was when he came and he did the Irish Breakdown interview last July, and it was like, this guy understands what is going on, and he is genuine. I happen to believe what he says. That's why not for 1 second did I not believe what happened to Tyler Buckner, right? I mean,
you're in the minority there.
Which blows my mind.
There's some grassy knoll stuff and a book depository part of the conversation. And
I just don't get it, Brian.
I don't really care to spend any more time on it.
No, me neither. But the bottom line to me is he is a very genuine person. And every interaction that I have had with him and that you have had relayed to me tells me he's a genuine person.
I mean, look, we don't know if Marcus Freeman's going to win to Notre Dame. I think he is, but we don't know. We'll have to find out. But there's one thing you can never say about him, and that's that he's not real.
Right.
Now, everybody has, look, I mean, we do it in this show. There's things we don't say. There's certain things I would like to say that I don't for obvious reasons. And
right.
And I don't walk around my house all day with a polo on and a hat on. I mean, so there's always a presentation to it, but we always say like, but you're going to get who we are. Like we're going to be real with you. We're not going to just lie to you.
Right.
And that's just how Coach Freeman is. I mean, that's the thing is like, win or lose, he's going to go down with integrity.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's nice. And
I love it.
It's we've kind of had to, I'll say kind of sacrifice that a little bit over the last, 5-6 years where it's kind of like, you're winning, but yeah. So but I think, JoJo, to your question, that's why Notre Dame, a big part of the reason why Notre Dame right now is the number 1 ranked recruiting class in the country. And, why they're doing so well with so many other top ranked players is because in this era where there's so many coaches that are just master BSers. I mean, it's disgusting, really. I think a lot of kids want something genuine. Now, that doesn't mean even every kid's going to want to come play for Notre Dame, or it may not be the best thing for them, but you're seeing Notre Dame mentioned a lot more. I mean, you're seeing top-ranked kids putting Notre Dame in their top 5 or 6 when Notre Dame's not even recruiting them anymore. You know, I mean, like there's a 5-star offensive lineman that Notre Dame hasn't recruited for a while that put them in his top 6. And it's like, they're not even recruiting that kid anymore. But that's just the perception now that Notre Dame has. And it's going to be a fun ride. Now, if you want to keep recruiting top classes, you've got to win some games.
Absolutely.
And we'll find that out. But, you know, I'm pretty confident that that's going to continue.
I do too.
And take a step up for a number of reasons, which we'll have all summer to talk about.
Operating with integrity, I think you call it juju, call it karma, call it whatever you want. But to me, operating with integrity is just, it leads to winning, number one, if you're doing it the right way. And it just makes the winning just that much sweeter, in my opinion. So I hope nothing for the best, obviously, for Marcus Freeman because of who he is, also because I'm a fan and because we cover the team. And it's a lot more fun to cover a winning team than it is a losing team.
Which has made the last few years tolerable.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And winning covers up warts, let's just call it, you know? So there is that. Winning cures a lot of things. So JoJo does have another comment / question in here. Leaving, I'm going to butcher this one.
Okunlola.
Thank you. Okunlola out. Leading for Pendleton, Absher, and Searfeld, and Jagasaw, and still in the mix.
We've had to learn to properly say that. Yeah.
Thank you.
We were getting it wrong for a long time. That's my fault. I had you trained to say it the right way.
I know, and that's why I remember it now. I'll get back. I'll get it. And still in the mix for Freeling. How would you rate it if we get all of them?
Well, first of all, I want to switch a couple guys around. They are not leading for Sullivan Absher. And as a matter of fact, if you read the article on the front page of Irish Breakdown, so what Ryan Roberts did, so Ryan's actually traveling from New Jersey to South Bend, and he's still getting a ton of work done. The guy's incredibly productive. But
it's crazy.
He did this morning, we published a sort of a where things stand with all the uncommitted 2023 kids that are going to be on campus. And, he said in there, and he's been saying for a while that Notre Dame wasn't in the great place that a lot of people were saying with Sullivan Absher. Clemson right now is the team to beat. For him, we believe he's got a final 3 of Notre Dame, Clemson, and NC State. I would put Freeling in there instead of Absher in regards to Notre Dame potentially leading for. I don't know if I would say that they're the leader for Searfeld either. I think they're certainly in the mix and have a chance with a strong weekend to, close the deal on that one. I do believe they lead for Pendleton. We still do believe they lead for Jagusa.
See, you almost did it.
Yeah, I did it wrong. I just had to quickly recognize it. Jagusa. But to answer your question, JoJo, if Notre Dame got Pendleton, Absher, Searfeld, and Jagusa, that'd be a good offensive line class. It wouldn't be a great offensive line class for me because it wouldn't have 2 top-level tackles. I really believe for this offensive line class to be considered sort of that next level, like, okay, excellent, like this is the standard you expect from Harry Heastand, it needs to have Monroe, Freeling, and Charles Jagusa. It does. Now, if you give me Jagusa, Freeling, Pendleton, and Searfeld, that's one heck of an offensive line class. One heck of an offense. You have 2 pure tackles. You have 2 interior guys. I'd still try to find maybe a 5th guy, especially with some of the injuries in the 2 previous classes that have kind of crept up. But that would be one heck of a 4-man class because Jagusa and Freeling are both 5-star upside guys at tackle, and that would be big time. That's how I'd look at it. And then maybe you can get Elliott Page on campus this summer. They're trying to bring him in June. That would be a big one as well.
Kamikaze fullback. Aren't all fullbacks kamikazes? I like that. How does James reclassifying affect wide receiver recruiting in this class? How does it affect his development as a wide receiver?
And we all need to pump the brakes on the Braylon James reclassifying stuff. People are chalking this up like it's a done deal. It's not. It's not even something that there's a reason I haven't wrote an article about it right now. If it even happens, it's in the infancy stages. Okay, so we need to chill out on the Braylon James reclassifying conversation for now. How it affects receiver recruiting, it doesn't at all. And we've had a lot of people say, well, if Braylon James reclassifies, that means they can now take. So no, him being in 22, 23 or reclassifying back a year doesn't change what your scholarship numbers are and what your needs are at the position. The reason Notre Dame needs to take 4 receivers in this class is because they only got 1 last year. If he reclassified, hypothetically, which again, I'm not putting a lot of stock in that just now. I mean, it is something that his family has expressed interest in. But again,
Right.
it's super infancy stages.
But not all of his family, and that's part of the problem.
Right.
Yeah.
And you check that out on the message board. We kind of explain kind of where it's at there. But there's a lot more that goes into this than him just wanting to. And he may change his mind in a month, right? I mean, there's a lot that goes into this. So I want to pump the brakes on that. But the point of the question is, if it happened, you wouldn't need 4 because you only got 1 anymore, because you'd now have 2 in last year's class. And it's a freaking excellent 1-2 punch in Tobias Merriweather and Braylon James.
Right.
So there wouldn't be that same need for 4 guys, because the reason that you need the 4 guys now, or 4 to 5 now, is because you came up so short last year. Right. And the scholarship limit doesn't raise beyond 85 because he reclassified. So it doesn't impact as far as recruiting in this year's class at all. You're going to still keep recruiting the guys you want with the numbers that you were going to have before. They're still going to look at Braylon James as part of that conversation. How does it affect his development as a receiver? That would be the bigger question.
Yeah.
There's 2 ways of looking at this, Vince. Number one is you would add a talented player to your roster in a year where depth is a concern. He adds a skill set that's a bit unique. It's one that him and Tobias Merriweather would share that a lot of others don't, as far as the taller, skinnier, faster, vertical type of player. They're not quite like Deion Colsey. Deion's more of the bigger body W type of guy. It would allow Braylon to get a jump start on being coached by Chancey Stuck. You'd give him a jump start on the strength program. My expectations for him as a freshman, as a reclassified guy, would be obviously less than it was if he were to go through his senior year and continue developing and do all those kind of things. But it would put him in much better position to have an even greater impact in 2023 than he would have if he plays in high school. I don't think there's a losing scenario here for him. It's not a bad thing for you to, if you're dead set on this, and you think you're mentally, emotionally, academically, and physically ready to do this, then go for it. All right, he'll have all summer to spend time in a weight room. Notre Dame would be able to, if he were to reclassify, again, we're just doing with the hypothetical that Kamikaze fullback gave us. Let's say that as soon as they get that cleared, he can then sign his letter of intent, and he can get the strength program and all those type of things that they would need. That would help him fill out a little bit, but he would be a depth guy in year 1. It would be about providing depth in year 1. He's not going to come in and like beat out Braden Lindsey, and he's not going to beat out,
right.
Lorenzo Styles and all that. It's about getting him ready to then, play a role now, learn. Because look, honestly, playing scout team against, let's just hypothetically say it's like Chance Tucker and Benjamin Morrison, playing scout team. I'm sorry, not even against them. I looked at it completely the wrong way. Playing scout team, even if he's on scout team, and he's going against Cam Hart and Clarence Lewis and Tariq Bracy and Jade Mickey, Ryan Barnes, Philip Riley, whoever he's going against is going to make him a whole lot better than playing against guys in, Round Rock, Texas, and
in high school,
the Austin area and all that kind of stuff. Right. And, but at the same time, his production has never been elite. So there's pros and cons to all of it. I think at the end of the day, it helps him be more advanced in 2023 than he would have been otherwise. And so as long as the other part's okay, because Vince, you know me, I'm not a huge fan of the early enrolling thing. I think from a football standpoint, it's great. I'm looking at it more from a young person standpoint. You and I both remember our proms.
Absolutely.
We remember our graduations. We remember our last semesters in high school, good or bad.
Right.
And all those type of things. And that's part of development and he would miss like the whole senior year. Right. And, I don't love that idea, but at the end of the day, I'm also about personal freedom. And if Braylon James and his mom and his dad sit down and say he's mentally ready, he's emotionally ready, he's academically ready, and he'll get physically ready, and Notre Dame embraces it, which I think they would if it worked out, then I support that too, because it is their choice. And at the end of the day, I do think long-term it would be better for him. I think he would develop faster and better if he were able to do that. So that's my answer. It's a good question.
That's a great question. John A1, of course, he's got, He's got it stockpiled, as John always does. So thank you, John. He says, which players are you hearing had a great spring?
Oh, I mean, we could go a long way on this,
Yes.
John. I'm going to have something on the message board about this after the spring game, but I'll give a couple just to kind of to whet the appetite a little bit. Obviously, the linemen, and we've heard about Joe Walton and Blake Fisher. We've heard about Lorenzo Styles, Jadarian Price. We've talked about. Two guys on defense that I've really heard a ton about, especially down the stretch, is obviously Jade Mickey, who's a name we've heard. But I've heard a ton about Junior Tuel. I had another buddy of mine text me today about it. He's like, hey, I talked to so-and-so, former player at Notre Dame, and, man, he really raved about Junior Tuihalamaka. And so that's what you and I were talking about yesterday is like if these Mike linebackers don't play well or if one of them gets hurt, like, you may get Wally pipped in a heartbeat with Junior Tuihalamaka, coming along because he's really picked up the defense. Really, I mean, he's always a smart kid. He's an intelligent kid, Vince. But I've seen a little bit of film of some of the practices, and that kid can move. I mean, he can really move, and he's already their biggest middle linebacker weight wise, but he can move. So he's a guy that I would say let's definitely keep an eye on, kind of where he is and what he's doing, because he's a guy to watch as far as busting through the depth chart as a true freshman.
Nice. There's a couple super chats down there, Brian. I didn't know if you wanted to grab a couple of them. There we go.
I'll just keep going, Vince, and I'll bring them up as I see fit.
Sounds good. Bayside Tiger 6. With what you guys know behind the scenes. Oh, well, here we go. What teams in the past 10 to 15 years would make good 30 for 30s?
The 2016 team, for sure.
That was a train wreck. But
there just was so much drama.
You would almost need it like from the end of the 15 season into the 16. Does that make sense?
Yes.
You know what I mean? Because I remember you telling me after the 15 season, like, hey, man, they're heading down a bad path after that. I'm like, what are you talking about, man?
Yeah, you got on me a little bit because you're like, they just went 10-3. They almost beat Clemson. They almost beat Stanford. Yeah, you got on me a little bit.
And you were like, no, seriously, they're
just how talented people. Like, I don't think people realize how talented that team was in 2015.
Right. They're like, they're going to go in one of two directions, and you're like, I'm afraid they're going to go in the other direction.
Yeah, I said that on Bill King's show too. I said they're either going to kind of, this is going to make them all better, and they're going to have a great year, or they're going to implode.
Yeah,
but even then, when I meant implode, I meant like 5-7. I meant like 6-6,
right?
7-5,
not 4-8.
I didn't see 4-8 coming because I knew the schedule was going to be soft,
right?
But man, there was so much. I mean, there was a player revolt. It got to the point with the relationship with the defensive coordinator that it was going to get really bad. I mean, I told you about what happened with one of the defensive coaches and him during a game early that year. I mean, the Malik Zaire, Deshaun Kaiser drama and just the locker room friction that caused. And man, it was a weird, wild year. And that would have made a really, and the other one's 2012. Yeah, I mean, if you think about 2012, that was the Notre Dame's kind of comeback season. You think of the great goal line stand against Stanford and then going on the road against Oklahoma. And then all the while there's this Manti Te'o situation that's twofold. One is a middle linebacker's putting together a Heisman Trophy caliber season.
Right.
And then the other part of that really started in September when he was talking about his grandmother and his girlfriend.
Right.
And then you've got the Brian Kelly interviewing with the Eagles and just a lot of the locker room drama that was going on leading up to that bowl game. And it's like, well, that would make for a pretty interesting 30 for 30 team season 2. And there's a special teams coach that got punched out in the office by another coach during the Charlie Weiss era. There was so much craziness the last 15 years. Like, it's just, it can make it, and not many of them are positive. Like, that's the
good. Well, that's what makes good 30 for 30s. I mean, let's be honest. But the other one for me would be 2021. Honestly, I would have loved to see the behind the scenes throughout the season, and
just be that one guy's a douche. That's all that one's about.
Oh, I know, but I would like to see if it was visible to cameras that were just around, right? Him checking out second half of the season. You know what I'm saying? Like, was that obvious? Was that, you know what I mean? Like,
I get it.
And then the whole I mean, gosh, the drama from the end of the regular season all the way through, like that would have been,
And kind of how his attitude on certain people changed after the
yes,
Cincinnati game, and
absolutely. I think that would
how
have
he
been
turned
good.
on some people, and then the BS
Yeah.
that he pulled when he left to go to LSU.
Yes.
Calling players, calling coaches, doing all that
Yes.
nonsense. There could be a great Brian Kelly 30 for 30
Yes.
with
Well,
how the last year's gone.
there you go.
Like that would be that one would be
And
interesting.
there still could be one, depending on how things go down in the boot.
Yeah.
Let's be honest.
Yeah. Remember when that guy had like his team on the verge of a playoff and then he left to go to the SEC and he was like out of coaching within 3 years? You remember that? What was that guy's name again? Yeah.
Anyway.
Freaking weirdo.
Okay. Ty C has a quick recruiting question. Do you have any thoughts on the Georgia tight end commit visiting Notre Dame this weekend? I hope taking 2 tight ends possibly doesn't impact us taking 5 defensive linemen.
Like, I don't have a lot. His name's Lawson Lucky. He's from Georgia. I believe Mike Singer from On 3 is the one that reported that. I don't have a lot of intel on that. I would be a little surprised if they were to make a push for him right now. And look, y'all, if they are going to take a second tight end, it's because the offensive numbers are such that they can do that. What y'all need to understand, and Ty C, I'm not saying this in criticism. I'm just explaining it because just so you can have further understanding how it works. Normally, there's a certain number of scholarships allotted to the offensive side of the ball and a certain number of scholarships allotted to the defensive side of the ball. Sometimes in recruiting, however, you can kind of petition to say, hey, look, could we get an extra one? And it may be a year where, we really need 4 receivers, but we had an extra grad guy come back and the board's just not great. We're fine at 3. So, yeah, you guys take a 5th. There's got to be communication. And there will be communication. And I think it's especially better when you have like directors of recruiting that work with sides of the ball and someone like Chad Bowden, who's not a coach. I think that's big as well. But, I look at it, Vince, and say, they're not going to take a second tight end and then all of a sudden, like, sorry, defensive staff, you guys can't have a 5th defensive lineman now. That's not how it works.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be too concerned about it at this point in time in regards to how it impacts beyond whether or not Notre Dame's interest levels there. I don't know. I mean, he's not coming on campus if he's never talked to the staff. So clearly there's some communication. And we've said before that there's some interest in possibly taking a second tight end in this class. It would just surprise me a little bit if it happened this early and if it was him, but maybe they see something that we don't. But I mean, yeah, that's my thoughts on that.
Notre Dame 2164, is the Dante Moore leaning to LSU rumors true, or people just saying that to get Notre Dame fans angry?
That's why you need to be on the message board. I've answered this question several times. Dante Moore's not going to LSU. That'd be shock me. And I'm honestly at the point now where I'm sorry to say I'm sick and tired of talking about Dante Moore because there's so much bull crap out there about him that I have to answer constantly.
Every day, multiple times a day.
Call. I'm not mad at Notre Dame 2164. It's like, stop listening to those people. Right. I'll tell you if there's something to worry about.
Right.
I promise. Okay. Until then, let's just let the process play out. Okay. Dante has been adamant from day one. He was going to take visits. He never changed his story. Notre Dame wanted him to commit earlier. That's fine. They're okay with whatever he does as long as he ends up in the class. And that's what they're shooting for.
Right.
But, y'all have to understand how this business works. Okay. We don't do this for a reason. That's why we have this channel. That's why we have the message board, because we want to be able to drive revenue to our brand without having to put up the kind of crap that people use to make. The reality is people are looking for clickbait. And the whole thing about the LSU rumors, there's a guy was like, hey, I heard that, he's leaning to LSU. Here's the article. And you're like, the article says nothing about that.
Right.
It's like, it still very clearly says that Notre Dame is his leader, but LSU's charging. It's like, but what happens is because people don't freaking read articles and they just read headlines, they'll take a headline, run with it. I'm not talking about 2164. I'm talking about where this rumor started. And it kind of drives me nuts because, of course, once that happens, my phone gets inundated with, have you heard this? And I'm like, have any of you actually read the article? No, I haven't. Okay, read the article. And then if you have questions, then come back to me.
Right, exactly.
And of course, I don't hear back from anybody at that point.
I hear you.
So that's the reality of it. So we got a super chat from Andrew Sakalowski. Who is going to be the second best trash talker on the team behind Mickey? That is a good question. I don't know if I have an answer to that. I'm trying to think of who even on the team right now is a known trash talker, Vince. I don't know if I could.
Yeah, not
I don't
like
know if I could point to
outwardly,
that.
not Jordan-esque, you know what I mean? Like I don't know that there's anybody.
I wouldn't be shocked if one of the Adamiolas is a good trash talker.
Ooh, that could be a
That
good
wouldn't
one.
surprise me. I haven't heard that. I'm trying to think of guys that I've heard that are trash talkers, and I really
Is
couldn't.
Lindsay a trash talker?
I don't think I've never
No?
heard that. No, I've
Okay.
never heard that.
I'm just trying to like think of games and like
Braylon's kind of a smart kid, so I feel like his trash talking might like go over people's heads. He's kind of a smart kid and like say something you're like, "Oh, thanks," and you don't realize you just got insulted.
right.
There's no other receivers I can
great.
think of, no running backs, none of the quarterbacks. Yeah, I really can't think of anybody because again, especially we're going to compare him to Jade and Mickey,
Nobody talks.
I'd have
like
to
him.
think. I'd have to ask around about that because there may be some because that's not really something that I ask about. It's just Jaden's is so over the top.
Well, and that's the thing,
that
and
people talk about it.
And I think that it's also because we don't really see that very often, and so it makes it even more obvious, I guess, is the best way to put it, right? So, I can't really think of anybody off the top of my head either.
Let's see what's next, Vince.
Yes, sir. John says, I heard Steve Angeli moves a bit better than people thought. Would it surprise you if he flashed a higher potential on Saturday? Not on Saturday because he's going to be wearing the red jersey. Anybody blows on him, they're going to blow it dead. So I don't really know that we're going to be able to see a whole lot of athletic ability or moving around.
I just want to know where these I heard this comes from. Like, this is what I would appreciate people did. If you're going to say you heard something,
tell me
where you heard it from.
Yeah, right.
That's not criticism. It just helps provide context.
Correct.
Because again, there's certain people that have been kind of pushing that angle, and there's just a whole lot of other things out there. So we'll see. We'll see.
Ty C says, do you think the defensive talent that we are bringing in is equal or better than the offensive talent that USC is bringing in?
Better. I mean, if we're looking at the last couple of years, look, USC hasn't brought in a ton of offensive talent. It's just been some high-end guys, Caleb Williams, Mario Williams, the Branch kid that they just recently got. I don't really, I mean, again, here's the deal. Everything that we've heard about USC is all skill players. And last I checked, this isn't flag football and it's not 7-on-7 football. It's 11-on-11 football, which means you need to have some linemen. Notre Dame's bringing in top 100 linemen like it's nobody's business, and USC can't bring in anyone to block them. So
I like Notre Dame's chances there. Sorry.
Yeah.
Look, if you're building a team, you're starting with the lines. Like you have to
quarterback. Now USC's got one of those down.
Yes, I agree.
But let's see about the other.
But if you don't have a good line, forget about it.
But I hope they do. Look, it's good. I'm going to write an article. So I got a bunch of off-season stuff that's going to be a lot of fun planned, and one of them is going to be, and I've talked about this before, but one of them's going to be like there are certain teams that are it's good for college football if they're better. And we've talked about this before. Miami's won, Florida State's won, Texas has won, Ohio State, Michigan, Notre Dame, Penn State, for a bunch of reasons. But it's better for college football, and it's better for Notre Dame if USC is good.
Absolutely.
And so I hope that they do get good again. I hope Lincoln Riley does at USC what he did at Oklahoma, because I never feared playing Oklahoma in the playoff.
Still don't.
Still don't.
Still don't. Yeah.
And I think USC is going to be the same way, but they're still a ways away. Like, everybody's obsessing over the skill talent. Like, they got to block somebody.
Right. Exactly.
And if Caleb Williams is running for his life the same way Keaton Slovis was the last 2 years,
doesn't matter.
He played behind one of the better lines in the country last year with one of the best offensive line coaches in the country last year. Well, that guy stayed at Oklahoma, and none of those linemen transferred. Like, I would have, if I'm Caleb Williams, like, hey, I love Mario Williams and he's dynamic, but could I trade him for a left tackle, please? Like,
It's true. I mean, no, it's a really good point, because if they don't have a line, forget about it. I'll take Notre Dame's line and what they're going to do to the backfield all day.
Now they're closing the gap on Notre Dame. I will say that.
They had a long.
They had a long way to go.
I was going to say they're here now. They're
Notre Dame's played like crap against USC a few times the last several years and has still beat them.
Right.
I mean, last year I thought they played like crap and still beat them convincingly.
Yeah.
2018 they played like crap and still beat them by 2 touchdowns. we've seen several times where Notre Dame has not played well against USC and still beat them somewhat convincingly.
Yeah.
And part of it is because they're not good. They watch the film and these guys just aren't good. And they don't, they haven't gotten up for that game the way that I think they need to. But, we'll see. But I hope USC, I hope they get better. I do.
All right, William Chesney, thank you for the super chat. Brian, can we please talk the staff into taking all three of Houston, Moore, and help me out here?
I think it's Traore. I just kind of sounded out. I don't know if that's correct.
Okay, fair enough. Just stockpile defensive line studs. Does that tie the staff's hands with who they can take in 24?
Well, look, guys, we've been saying this for a while. Like Notre Dame has been trying to find a ways to take all three for a while. I mean, that's not known. Look, it's what's kind of frustrating me is the person that's now driving they're going to take all three is the person that was driving they're not going to take all three rumors before. So it's like, and what I said is like they're going to try to find a way to get all three. I've been saying that all along, and now it's like, oh, they're going to bring all three. They've always wanted to try to find a way. You only have 85 scholarships, right? And there's all types of things that have to go on to open it up, but that's why they've been going about this process the way they want to. They've always wanted to bring in all three. They've wanted to bring in 5 linemen in this class. That it's just 4 was for a while. They're the number that the defensive staff was targeted. This is what you can do based on this. Okay. Those numbers have changed, and it's more likely that they're going to be able to bring in all 5 now. If they get them, they got to get them, right? And I feel pretty good about those 3. 2 for sure, I would flat out say Notre Dame leads for. The third, I think they do, but we're a little less certain of that. But 2 of those 3, we definitely believe. But this is what I said at the time when the first report came out about they were going to take this guy over that guy. And no, that they were always going to try to get all 5, and they were never going to say no to Jason Moore ever. So that's kind of my thoughts on that. But yeah, but to the point, I want to address something else from William's question here real quick. He says, some stockpile D-line studs. I get that premise, but we need to kind of be careful with the whole stockpiling thing that people say. Like recruiting is not just something where you just take as many guys you get. You only have 85 scholarships. Notre Dame's not going to force a bunch of guys off their roster to make room for high school players.
Right.
That's not how they roll. And so you can't just stockpile for the sake of stockpiling. You have to have some sort of roster management on your team, right? You can't be loaded up with D linemen, but you don't have enough guys to cover, right? You can't be loaded up with offensive linemen, but nobody to run routes and catch the football, right? So there's a bit of a science to this that people have to understand. And it's not as simple as, oh, of course you take that guy. Well, it sounds nice, but it's not always how it works.
Right.
In this instance, they've always been trying to take all 5. I still think they'd like to take all 5. We've been hearing for a while that they think it's going to work out, but for a while there, 4 was the number they were given. But the defensive line staff, to their credit, defensive staff and Al Washington, to his credit, kept recruiting like he was going to eventually get to take all 5. And I think at some point they'll be able to do that if they can land them all.
Yeah.
That's the key.
John asks, Chance Tucker and Philip Riley seem buried. Who needs to have the bigger day?
John, they're redshirt freshmen, buddy. Yeah. I mean, they're redshirt freshmen, right?
Right.
They're okay. After next year, Tariq Bracy's going to be gone. After next year, Cam Hart's probably going to be gone after this upcoming season. So they'll be fine. I don't think the spring game really will have a big effect on either one of them. I think, in desire to still respect the question, if we're going to say that what happens on Saturday could have an impact on who kind of is able to make a move, I think it's bigger for Philip Riley, because I think with Chance Tucker, I think there's an understanding of why he's a little bit behind maybe some of the other guys after his freshman year. Didn't play a ton as a senior because of COVID rules. They played in the spring and played like 3 games. He was a little bit behind. So I think Philip Riley was the guy. And Chance is also, you've seen him, Vince. He's pretty skinny. He's tall and skinny.
Yep.
Needs to fill out the frame. So Chance wasn't a guy we expected to play right away. Philip's the guy that we kind of thought was going to have a chance to play right away. Yep. If he doesn't play well in the spring and then finish off with a good spring game, you wonder, like, okay, is he going to kind of get passed up by some of these younger guys? So in the spirit of the question, I would say I think Philip Riley needed the bigger spring. Right now, of course, the blue gold game is a part of the bigger spring for me. So that would be the answer to my question on that.
Zach Martin, does Jaden Thomas getting picked ahead of Deion Colsey track with it, but what you've been hearing about practices?
Guys, Chris Tyree was the last running back taken. It doesn't. I don't care about where guys were taken. I haven't. I mean, I don't. You're going to ask me to comment on where a guy was taken in a fun team spring draft.
And that's what it was. It was fun. Like, that was
Tyson Ford was the last guy picked on the defensive
right.
line. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know what I mean, Zach, congrats. You've left me speechless. I mean,
all right, here's another one. Notre Dame 2164, more productive this year overall, Avery Davis or Lorenzo Styles?
I'd probably go with Lorenzo.
I would too.
I think Avery's always going to kind of be what he's been, which is just that possession guy, the move the needle guy, move the chain guy that occasionally would have like that big game because you don't key on him. And so, like, Purdue didn't pay attention to him last year and he smoked them. Clemson didn't pay attention to him. He smoked them. I think Avery's just going to be that steady Eddie guy, Vince. He's just going to, move. He's never going to have like a bunch of big games. He's not a 1,000-yard receiver. He's just going to be clutch. And he may in the year like third or fourth in the team in receptions or receiving yards, and doesn't have the production of a Styles and doesn't have the production of like a Michael Mayer and maybe Braden Lindsey from a yard standpoint. But you're going to look at his catches, and let's say he has, 50 catches for 600 yards. Let's not blow your socks off numbers, right? But then if you like go through and look at those 50 catches, you're like, yep, that was a key third, four play. Oh, that was on the game-winning drive. You had to move the chains on third down. Like, oh, look, that was a big play. That's how Avery's been the last couple of years. Like,
absolutely.
Even in games where he doesn't have a lot of production, you're like, okay, he had 2 third down. He only had 3 catches for 35 yards, but he had, all 3 of them were like on third down, move the chains on scoring drives. And that's how Avery's always been. So pure production, I would say Lorenzo, but I think Avery is going to be a very, very clutch player for Notre Dame this year, especially as early in the season as teams, if he's healthy,
right,
as teams really focus on 87. Because I have a feeling your first 3 opponents are going to just be like, that dude right there, number 87, is not beating us. 21, 3, 16, 83, 0. Somebody else is going to have to beat us. 87 is not going to be that guy that beats us. Now, it's easier said than done.
I was going to say, he still might beat you, but yeah.
But that's going to be the plan. And then it's going to take some of those other guys to step up. If he's healthy to start the season, then I don't know if he will or won't be. I expect Avery Davis to have some of those clutch plays.
I think he's on a good path. I mean, he was running through drills, not padded, but he was running through drills at practice and things like that. So I think that's a good sign going into the summer. And I will also say, and I know this isn't necessarily part of the question, but the impact that Avery Davis is going to have in that wide receiver room is also going to be ridiculously important. Like, I think he's the leader in that room, right? So that is going to be, he'll have an impact off the field as well as on the field. But yeah, I agree with you. I think he's going to have a lot of third down catches, touchdowns when it matters. You know what I mean? Like, there's those big moments. That's when, you can look at 3 and good things are going to happen. So it's a good question, though. I really like that question.
I think from a leadership standpoint, we talk a lot about the concerns at receiver, and they're justified, right? Like, this isn't like the receiver position is fine. The guy's got to step up. Like,
sure.
I mean, I was just asked about Deion Colsey and Jade Thomas, and I got nothing. Like, I haven't seen either one of those guys do anything. You know what I mean? Like, I got nothing for you. And it's not very often. I got nothing. You know what I mean? Like, but so those concerns are legitimate. But the one thing that I'm not concerned about with the receiver position this year between Avery Davis and Joe Wilkins, and we're hearing good things about Braden Lindsey from this standpoint too. Be a lot of leadership.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's going to be important, especially if there are some early season struggles. And I'm not saying there are going to be. I'm saying if there is,
sure.
You've got the leadership of guys that can step up and really make plays and provide, hey, we got this, we're fine, shake off the drop, whatever the case may be. And I think that's going to be important. It's going to be very important for what is going to be an otherwise young. It's like there's this big difference. Like there's this, because you have 2 years in a row where you don't have a receiver on your roster from those classes. There's not a receiver on the roster from the 19 class. There's at receiver. Cam Hart's still on the roster, but at receiver.
Right.
And there's not a receiver left on the receiver depth chart in the 2020 class because Xavier Watts is on defense. You went 2 whole years without a receiver that lasted more than 2 years on your roster at receiver. So you've got these 5th-year guys and then a bunch of young guys.
A bunch of kids.
And that's a strange dynamic.
Yes, it is.
But I think it's going to be great for the present and future because you've got these 3 veteran guys that can give leadership that not only helps this year, but then shows Lorenzo Styles the way of being a leader. So Lorenzo can maybe be that guy in 2023, maybe a little bit earlier than anticipated because he won't be a senior. So I think there's a lot of benefits to that group as well, even if the production doesn't necessarily match like, oh, wow, those guys are super important. The value for them, especially Avery Davis, is going to be well beyond just the production, in my opinion.
Tommy wants to know, Tommy Guns, how are the coaches split for the teams tomorrow? I don't know if you have an answer to that.
I haven't looked at that.
I mean,
I don't care.
Here's what I know. Reese and Washington are together. McCullough and Golden are together.
Mm-hmm.
I do know that because they're going to be running offense, defense, and then offense, defense. Other than that, I'm not exactly sure how it's split up, but I know that those are kind of the leaders, if you will, for the teams. So that's all I got for you, though.
Okay, good to know.
Yep.
do you think Harry Heastand's not going to be coaching all the offensive linemen?
Well, that's why they're wearing green.
Do you think Al Golden's not going to be paying attention to all the defense?
Right.
Coaching guys up. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Utah Irish, in college football, how much does home field advantage actually help anyway? I know loud noises can affect snap counts, but can it really change the outcome of games?
It can if they're 2 relatively evenly matched teams. Like if Alabama goes and travels to Vanderbilt, playing at Vanderbilt has 0 impact on the outcome of that game. But if you look at some of these games that Alabama's lost this past year to Texas A&M, and you look to Auburn, and I think, and it's not so much just about the crowd noise, right? Like that's obviously part of it. And you had the 12th man at Texas A&M, and A&M got off to that big lead and got the crowd in the game and all that. And we've seen that impact games before. Notre Dame players talked about how loud the crowd. I mean, Brian Kelly still talks about how loud the crowd was in Miami. Miami's crowd shook you. That says all you need to know. But that's kind of part of it. But for me, it's more about football players are creatures of habit.
I knew you were going to go there.
Get into this routine of being at home and, you go to class, and road games throw that off. I mean, when you're Blake Fisher, Joe Alt, Gabriel Rubio, Michael Mayer, there's not a plane in America that you're going to be comfortable on, right? Unless you're getting like one of those ones where you've got the recliner. Notre Dame doesn't fly that way. You got to get on the bus and go to the airport. And unfortunately, there's an airport in South Bend, so it's not that bad.
Yeah, it's not that bad.
But you've got 2, 3, 4, because Notre Dame doesn't just go from Alabama to Auburn or over to Atlanta or down to Gainesville.
They're going to California, and they're going to Florida,
Texas, right. And so these are decent trips,
right?
And then you got to get off, and then you got to go get on the bus, go to your hotel, sleep in a bed you're not comfortable in, eat food you're not used to eat. You know what I mean? And it's just it can throw you off your game. It can get you out of your habit, and you're in a locker room you're not used to. I always, when I played, even as a coach, I always would have a panic until I got fully dressed. I would always be afraid I forgot something.
Yeah.
Like always, so then you just kind of have that gnawing. Like, did I, you check my bag like 5 times. Like, did I? And I still to this day will have dreams where I'm in the locker room getting ready for a game and I realize like I forgot my pants or I forgot my helmet or I forgot my cleats or something. Like still to this day, I'll have some of those sometimes.
Well, then like some places there's like a ridiculously long walk from the locker room to the field, and there's like twists and turns and like it's just a lot of nonsense. Like crap, I don't even know how to get to the field.
Right. And so when you look at it, Vince, like in a game of 2 relatively evenly matched teams,
right,
that can have an impact. I mean, you look at how Notre Dame played against Virginia Tech this year. Notre Dame was not prepared to play well on the road in that game.
Right.
If they play that game at home, I don't think it's overly competitive. And then if you start sloppy, that then allows the opposing crowd to get in the game.
Absolutely.
And so, I do think it matters. I do think it matters. There's no question about it. I would never want to dismiss the importance of playing at home and those type of things, but It's just not this huge pendulum swinger, in my opinion. It just, it just isn't. But it matters. It
Yeah.
certainly matters.
John
It's
says,
a great question, by the way.
No, it really was. Would you consider Pittsburgh as a former rival? The program has slowly lost a lot of steam since Marino left. That was in the early 80s.
Yeah.
And the Big East dissolved. However, they used to be reasonably respectable opponent.
Yeah, I mean, there was a time, John, in the 80s. I have to pull up. I have started kind of entering this stuff in Notre Dame year by year. Let me pull this up. But there was a time, and I'm kind of looking at this, from a standpoint of like the rankings and stuff, that Pitt would often be a win over a ranked opponent for Notre Dame.
Yeah.
And like 1989, when they played Pitt, they were ranked 7th when they played, and finished the year ranked 17th. Of course, Notre Dame whooped them pretty good. I'm trying to look at some of the other years. Pitt was a little bit up. They were ranked 12th one year when they played. There was obviously, we remember some of the battles that Pitt gave Notre Dame during the Brian Kelly tenure as well. So there have been times when Pitt was a formidable foe. I wouldn't necessarily call them a rival per se, but they've had some great matchups, and I think that there's advantages to playing Pitt. I mean, if Notre Dame had to like have a 7-game schedule, let's say they passed a rule that says, as an independent team, you have to get minimum 8 teams on your schedule that you play every year to replicate, or 6.
Seem like a conference game or
something. Right. Because like Alabama's going to play 6 teams every year. Ohio State's going to play 6 teams every year. You have to get 6 teams that you have to play every year in order to be eligible for the playoff or something. Just like Pitt would probably be one of the teams I would strongly consider. It would be Navy and USC.
Yep.
Michigan State and Pitt would be 4 for sure that I would say I would want on the schedule regularly. Purdue, I'd add Purdue to that if you could. So those are probably the 5 of the 6 that I would say, I definitely want them on my schedule every year. And, at that point in time, I may keep Stanford on just because of that rule, whatever the case may be.
Right.
But those 5 for sure, Pitt would be one of those teams, because kind of going back to the previous question, I do like the notion that it is not that far of a game. And every other year you're playing either at Pitt or at Purdue or at Michigan State. Those type of road games are a little bit more manageable than those ones where you got to fly across country. Like Notre Dame had that one year, was a 15. They went out to Boston one week, and then like the next week they flew. They came home for Wake Forest, I think, and then the next week they flew back out. Or it might have been BC and Stanford back to back. But those are tough. I mean, that's doesn't excuse losing to inferior opponents, but when you're playing teams that are of your equal value,
right,
that can result in you losing by 2 to Stanford on the road because you've traveled as much as you have.
Here's a kind of a fun one. The 757 in the 90s was the best. Does anyone else think Estime and Diggs should change their numbers to 6 and 40 respectively? Real Notre Dame fans will get that reference.
Well, because Notre Dame backfield was the 90s was the best.
Yeah, I know, right?
And he's referring to Jerome Bettis and Reggie Brooks. I love the notion behind it. Right?
The homage.
I absolutely love the notion. Like, what? Honestly, what I would do is I would do stuff like that in like spring games. Or I would do stuff like that in throwbacks. Like, if you're going to have a throwback game where, like, let's say and I don't know what the rules would be on this, but like, let's say in 19 when they wore the 88 uniforms, I would have had Ian Book wearing number 9.
Yeah, they match up with the team.
Well, Braylon was already 25, so that would have worked. I would have had Tony Jones put on number 4 for Lee Becton. Like, I'd have had whoever your best D tackle was that year, pick a guy, have him be 97. Like, I think that'd be really cool. That's for, 97. No, actually, Zortz was, no, he was 50. That's Bryant Young. I'd have had him be 50. I'd have had, Stonebreaker's number. I'd have had one of my corners would have been number 1. Like that, like, if you're going to wear the uniform, then give a tribute to the jersey numbers kind of thing. I think that'd be pretty cool. And then maybe doing it during the spring, I think it'd be really cool. Like, hey, we're going to honor the 92 team, and so Jerome Bettis is back and Reggie's back. They're going to be the captains for those 2 teams or something like that. And, all of our guys are going to have numbers of, guys that played on that team and their names on the back.
That'd be real easy to do.
That'd be kind of fun, though. That'd be a lot of fun. I would love to see something like that. That'd be a lot of fun.
That would be a lot of fun. I agree with you.
I could see Marcus Freeman doing something like that too. The way he looks at the past and the tradition and all that. I could see him.
Yep.
I could see him. This is great response from Brandon Cuz. Thanks for the super chat, Brandon. But
he says Mickey takes first, second, and third.
Talking about trash talk.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome.
That's a great response.
That's well played, sir.
Yeah,
that's well played.
I gotta
go ahead.
I gotta ask Jarrett. Are you cool with me bringing up? Jarrett Grace is in the chat, and I want to make sure he's okay with me bringing up the comment he just made about the Showtime series in 2015. So if you're okay with me bringing that up, I'd love to bring that up because it speaks to something that we were talking about earlier. So yeah, and we'll stay on the trash talking topic here for now.
Just Your Ordinary Joe, thank you very much for the super chat. Back to the trash talking topic. Oh, Vince, okay. Let's hear whatever you can share about your chirp as a catcher that got you ejected by the ump. Who heard it?
I love that Joe remembers that.
I know, seriously. I mentioned it one time.
Yeah, and Joe's your guy. Look at him down there rocking the IB shirt in his avatar. I love it.
That's great. That is fantastic. I don't remember specifically what I said, but it was so, you're allowed to chirp as long as you're not chirping at the other team. So like what I would always do is I would pretend like I was talking to my pitcher, but basically disparaging the kid that was up to bat. And he ticked me off somehow, and I said something right to him, and it got me in trouble. Basically, I directed it right at him, and that was the end of that day for me. So
I only got tossed from one baseball game, and it was shocker, Vince. I lost my temper. Chucked my bat about 30 feet. Told the umpire I told him he could take his strike zone, shine it up real nice, turn that some sideways and stick it up his So
wow.
Yeah,
it's very specific that you remember that.
It just like that, but I said that, so
that's good.
I got tossed. It didn't help that I was at a Christian school either. It was like, you're not supposed to do that.
Not supposed to do that at all.
Yeah, but I know people in this chat are going to find it shocking. Like, this is great from Garen. No, not Brian. Talking about me losing my temper. I know, right? Super shocking.
I almost lost. I shouldn't say I almost lost my temper. We were getting beat by a team, a Christian school. We were getting beat. And the third baseman, before the game even started, and I knew it wasn't going to go well for us. Before it even started, I'm coaching third. He comes up, "Hey, coach, how you doing today?" Like, super polite, super nice. And then they just smoked us. I'm like, like it's just,
when they kill you with kindness, that can hurt. And I mean, I hardly ever argue with umpires. That was a rare thing for me because my dad was an umpire.
There you go.
He was one of the ones, like, he would like shine his shoes, like he would press his shirts, like he actually took it real seriously and did a good job. So I just had respect for that. But there were some where it was like, okay, some things need to be said. Right?
I hear you. Believe me,
the stare needs to happen when I just threw that pitch right down the middle of the plate and you called it a ball.
Yeah,
because you weren't paying attention. But yeah, normally that was a little like me losing my temper, not out of character. Me, having some choice words from an umpire, that was a little out of character for me.
John says, how much control does Notre Dame have in choosing the 5 ACC opponents that are scheduled?
Well, I mean, they're already scheduled for like the next.
I think the ACC does that. I don't
2035.
Yeah,
I know there's some conversation there.
Yeah,
that happened at the beginning. We don't want to have more this many road games and try to keep it 2-3 or 3-2 kind of thing. But other than that, it was don't give us this team in the same year. But once the schedule is set, it's set. I mean, and it's set for, I think 2035 is the last.
It's a ways out. Yeah,
is the last one. Vince, you see who sent the super chat?
Jim, our buddy Jim from WSBT, rocking the super chat. Thanks, Jim. Really appreciate it. I got tossed from a Little League game. #legend.
Yeah.
Okay, Jim, you and I are going to have a discussion about that one, getting tossed from a Little League
I got to know what got you tossed from a Little League game. That's what I'm really curious about. Like, I really got to know that one.
Oh, that's good stuff, Jim.
Got to know that one.
Corey D with the super chat. Thank you very much. Any part of you wish Notre Dame Stadium still looked like it did from 1930 to 1996? The aura and mystique of the place isn't the same. Plus, you had touchdown Jesus. Well, you still do. It just depends on where you're sitting. I mean,
I don't wish it looked like that. I mean, the reality is
it was tiny.
Here's the reality. the aura that's the wrong tradition that some people I think hold on to, because when you look at like who Newt Rockne was, right, and it's the house that Rockne built. He was an innovator. He would have been the first guy renovating the stadium for more seats, and he would have been the first guy with a scoreboard when they were a thing. Like,
absolutely,
that's the thing, is he always would have been ahead of the game, right? And so I think it's a more fun environment. I think the scoreboard helps. I think the lights help. I think all that stuff is really cool.
I agree.
The tradition of Notre Dame is being ahead of the game. They lost their way on that and got stuck into that means we have to have this old building forever and that old building forever. We have to have, lines facing a certain direction instead of your team name in the end zone. Like, that's not the stuff that is the tradition. Was being innovative and dominance and doing it a certain way, doing it the right way. That's the tradition to hold on to, not so much that you have to have, a plain stadium and all that. And the other thing too is what made the aura and mystique of that place great is the teams.
Mm-hmm.
No one's talking about the mystique of Notre Dame Stadium if they were Northwestern that whole time.
Right.
It's the teams are great. I mean, we've heard about, why aren't Notre Dame fans louder? And Vince, you and I have heard stories about how loud it was at Miami in '88 with 59,000 people in the stands. Put a better product on the field and fans louder.
That's a good point.
Simple as that. And put a product on the field that fans can be proud of. Don't make yourself adversarial to the fan base. And there's all types of things Notre Dame can do to make that part of the product better. But I think the stadium looks great. I love it. And
I think they did a good job with it.
Yeah. And then if they start winning, then it'll be like, oh, then we remember that. So
right.
But it's cool that Corey feels that way. That's totally fine. Everyone's allowed to have different opinions. Just for me, that's not the tradition that I do care about. The one thing I'll say is I do know a lot of people that are cool with everything about the new stadium, except it is a little harder to see touchdown Jesus. I do think that's the one thing that people. There's nothing you can do about it though. Right. Unless you were going to make that part of
you go like horseshoe.
Open.
You go a horseshoe style.
Right. But, I'll take the trade-off.
Yeah.
But it doesn't affect us as much just because when we're in the press box, we can still see it.
I was going to say, I've got honestly, the view that we have now in the press box, now it stinks for the sun, on certain days. But now we've got the Golden Dome and you've got Touchdown Jesus. You got a beautiful, vista behind good football that's being played. You know what I mean? I actually like it, to be honest with you. Okay. If IB got to choose the 5 ACC opponents in 22, would there be any changes on the schedule? Okay,
so they've got Clemson. Let me pull it. They got Clemson and Duke. Hold on a second.
North Carolina.
So for 22, yes. That's this upcoming season. So they got Clemson. They're at North Carolina. They've got Syracuse, Boston College at home. Syracuse at Syracuse, Boston College at home against Clemson. So they play North Carolina, 2, 3, Syracuse, Clemson. 4. They're only playing 4 ACC teams 4? This year.
I see 4.
Yeah, so Marshall's not, Cal's not, BYU's. Yeah, so they're only playing 4 this year. So they're 4 to 5. This will be one of those 4 years.
Okay.
No, I got no problem with it. I mean, look, you're playing 2 of the 4 at home,
right?
Which is fine. I think the North Carolina game comes at a good time. It's right after 2 games you should win. It's early enough in the season where North Carolina should be a decent team, in my opinion, but not so late in the year where all the new guys in the starting lineup have had a chance to gel.
Right.
Because I think North Carolina might sneak up on some people. The BC game is the one that that's going to be the intriguing one because it's going to be senior day and Phil Dracovic is coming and George Takis are coming back. And
true.
There's going to be a little extra motivation for them. But
you're coming off a Navy and it's going to be before Southern Cal. And I mean, just a lot of.
I would say I'd want to move that game somewhere else. I'd maybe trade it with Stanford or something like that.
I mean, the Syracuse game doesn't excite me in any way. Yeah. I mean, you could swap that one out. But yeah,
you need games like that.
And I get that. But you've got UNLV and you've got. I don't know. You've got some games in there that I don't care about.
But you need games like that. That's the thing, Vince. I've heard people say well, they need to make the schedule tougher. I'm like, you've got USC, Ohio State, and Clemson on your schedule. Yeah. 2 of those games are on the road. Plus you got BYU and Boston College. Your schedule is plenty tough. You can't play a gauntlet every year and then expect to, be 11-1 and 12-0.
Yeah,
you
need
some games that are in normal years, Stanford's better. And so you've got Stanford and then 2 games and then Clemson. You kind of got 2 winnable games in there. Of course, Stanford's not as good as they used to be, but if they were, it'd be good. And the other thing I like about the schedule is there's not 2 like gauntlet games back to back. I think that's important too.
That's true.
Yeah,
that's true.
The best closest you have to that is BC and USC.
I was just going to say that's I agree. That's the
Yeah.
closest one too. You took the words right out of my mouth. That is exactly what I was going to say. So,
yeah.
Hulk strongest. Would you compare Tui Alamaka to Manti or more Tavon?
Well, he's definitely more athletic than Tavon. I mean, I think he compares to Manti. Manti was special, right? Like Manti was a big time 5-star player. I think so I'm not saying he's as good as Manti. That'd be absurd hype for me. But they're very similar in the style of play. Okay. Very similar athletically, very similar style of play. Manti just was kind of just better at everything at the same age. Maybe Junior surpasses him when it's all said and done. But at this stage in their careers, Manti was a better player. He was just a little bit quicker, and but style of play, Vince. I mean, I know it's easy to make the comparison because they're both Polynesian, Hawaiian kind of thing, and so it's easy to make that. And
sure,
but that comparison also fits a lot because just style of play wise, they're so similar.
Yeah,
and sometimes we force comparisons because guys may look the same or be from a similar region, but sometimes they're just natural. And the Manti Jr. one to me is just a really natural fit, and I think Junior was one of the more overlooked guys in that class. He just because his ranking went so far down that I don't think a lot of people really appreciated just how good he was as a prospect, and had a great senior year, but he'd been committed so long by that point in time that it was just it just had kind of impacted kind of where they were.
Sure. Kamikaze fullback Brian, as a Bronco fan, what is your take on Javonte Williams? Is he the real deal? My fantasy football team should pay my IB membership for years.
Okay, I watched 0 Bronco games last year. So I mean, I'm a Bronco fan, but not really. I just don't watch the NFL much. I might this year, who knows? But from what he was in college, and then looking at his numbers this year and just what some people I've talked to have said about him, look, I sounds like he's the reason one of the reasons they got rid of Phillip Lindsay, right? I mean, so apparently Bronco people are super excited about him. And I think in the new offense, he should probably catch the ball a lot more. He caught the ball a decent amount at North Carolina. He's capable of it. But beyond that, I couldn't really tell you. Like I said, I'm a Bronco fan more for what they, from what I was a Bronco fan more than I am a Bronco fan, because I just don't watch much. I think the first NFL game I watched this year, Vince, was I think the Chiefs-Bills game
in the playoffs.
Yeah, that weekend was, I think, the first time I'd sat down, because there was the earlier game was at Tennessee, or no, it was the Rams and the Buccaneers, I think, played that same day.
Yeah,
I think
it was a great day of football.
Yeah, so that was, I think, the first, maybe the weekend before, but that's around when I started tuning. I'm just not an NFL guy. I don't like the game. I have a hard time paying attention to it anymore, to be honest with you.
All right, I'm going to throw this one up, and I'm going to lob it up to you, Brian. He's Craig Doherty says, question, how many touches will each back get on average? I know it's a guess, but how do you see the staff using their various strengths in the game plan? Love IB Nation. Thanks, guys. And
Thanks. You're going to be able to star some. That's
exactly why I'm leaving when I'm leaving. All right.
Craig, how many touches will each back get on average? I know it's a guess, but do you see the staff using their various strengths? First of all, I'm going to answer the second part first, because I really don't have a great answer for the first one, so, to be honest with you. Do I see them using their various strengths? Yes, I definitely think that'll be part of it. And we saw that a little bit last year with Coach Reese. Once the offense kind of opened up, it's like he kind of got more freedom to use the backs differently. I think that the offensive line hindered that as well. I think we've heard Coach Dylan McCullough talk about that, where he likes backs that can do different things. I think Notre Dame is going to be very pro-style in how they go about their business this year, offensively and defensively, which I think is going to help make it easier to kind of play to certain guys' strengths. But The big thing is, in order to do that, you have to have good line play. You have to have linemen that can block different things and do different aspects of it well. And so I think that part should be improved, but I absolutely think that they will use them to their strengths, certainly. As far as how many touches will each back get on average, it's too early for me to say that, just because I don't know who's going to be the one. And if Chris Tyree's the one, his touch breakdown may be a little different than Logan Diggs if he's the one, or Audric Estime if he's the one, because most likely Chris Tyree is going to have a much higher yards per carry average than those other guys. So he may be more in yards but fewer in touches. If Logan Diggs is the one, then it'll be a little bit different for him as well. So it's really a challenge. It's really a challenge for me to answer the first part of the question, just because at this point in time, I really don't know who that guy is going to be. So Charlie Weiss's last belt loop had a super chat talking about the schedule, and he said add Indiana, Miami, Oregon, and SEC to the schedule. I don't really care about playing the SEC very often, to be honest with you. I think that usually does more for them than it does for Notre Dame. Oregon, again, I don't see a lot of value in playing Oregon. They don't recruit against Oregon a ton. And it just, Miami, I'm fine seeing more on the schedule. Indiana, I don't care about Indiana. I'd rather play Purdue. I know Vince agrees with me on that. If you're going to play an in-state school, I'd rather play Purdue. 2 reasons. Number one, way more tradition. Number 2, Purdue consistently has a better football program. And number 3, it's closer. I believe West Lafayette, Vince can still down there, can correct me if I'm wrong. I believe West Lafayette is significantly closer than Bloomington, right? At least by hour, right? When you're talking about Indiana, at least an hour, I think. So there's no reason, if you're going to play an in-state school, in my opinion, right? I respect yours. I'm just giving you my response to that. So yeah, it's interesting. I'm going to have some schedule stuff coming out here soon too, just sharing my thoughts just for fun in the off season too. Blaine Tiller says, Brian, did you catch the Inside the Garage with head coach Marcus Freeman? Thought it was a great job by him showing the player and human side of Freeman. Do you prefer the player coach or the CEO coach? I don't have a preference. I think every coach needs to be. I did catch some of it. I haven't watched a lot of it. I got up to the point where he was talking about him and Troy Smith were almost about to brawl after practice, and then how Troy handled it afterwards I thought was pretty cool. But that's where I had to stop because we had to get ready for the show. I'll go back and listen to it later. I've told you I don't listen to other stuff. I don't listen to the Inside the Garage podcast. I don't listen to other people's stuff for obvious reasons. I'll listen to that one because I think it's pretty cool that that he's going on with the kids, and from what I saw, he was kind of just being himself. He wasn't head coach Marcus Freeman. He was just Marcus Freeman there for an interview with people that happen to be his players and some former players. I thought that was pretty cool. But I look, here's my thing on, do I prefer the players coach or CEO coach? Number one, I don't think there's an either or. I don't think you have to be a players coach or a CEO coach. I think Marcus Freeman's trying to be both of those. I think at the end of the day, what's going to be successful is that whoever you hire is just himself. I don't want Nick Saban trying to be something he's not, and he never has been, which is why he's been successful. I don't want you to try to be a player's coach. Like, what I hate? This is what I hate. Drives me nuts. I'll know a coach, and we talk, and I know how he talks, and then he'll be around certain players, and he'll talk different. And he'll walk into a certain group of players and like, hey guys, he'll shake hands, and then he'll walk to another player and like dap them up and start talking different. And I'm like, why do you talk different around those kids than you do those kids? You're a fraud. You're phony. Be yourself. Show respect and appreciation and love to them. They don't need you to talk like them or try to pretend to talk like them to be, cool with them. I think that's phony. And kids want genuineness. Kids want you to be who you are. Harry Heastand does not talk any different to a freshman than he does a senior in regards to, I'm going to be on you. I'm going to demand excellence. Kids respect that. I think that's what makes Marcus Freeman unique, is that he's just himself. And if that means he's most comfortable in a CEO role or a player's coach role or a hands-on role or whatever he chooses, as long as it's what he's comfortable with and what he thinks is best, I don't really have a lot to say on what I prefer. I want great coaches to be themselves. And the reality is you can be successful doing it all types of different ways. Dabo does it differently than Saban. Saban does it differently than Urban Meyer. Meyer did it differently than Spurrier. I mean, it's just hire a great coach, and then be yourself. And I think if you do that, you'll be successful. I really do. John A1, what was Charlie Weiss's big mistake that led to the drastic downfall from 06 to 07? Okay, so this is a great question, but I think it's a question that requires a little bit more than just Charlie Weiss's big mistake. And so what I mean by that, John, is this. Number one, there were things that happened before Charlie got there that led to the lack of success in 2007. Number one being the last two recruiting classes of Tyrone Willingham's tenure were really bad. And that is especially true of the 2005 class. And I'm going to go over the last two classes just to kind of point out just how bad they were. I mean, there were some good players that were selected in them, right? So I mean, I'm not going to act like all the kids were terrible, but here was the 04 class. So 04 would have been seniors in 2007, so they would have been the heart and soul of it, right? So you had Darius Walker and Justin Hoskins. Number one, Darius Walker left early for the NFL, so that didn't work out. Your quarterbacks were David Wolke and Darren Bragg. You had Chauncey Incarnito, John Catos, two offensive linemen. Your linebackers were Abdel Banda, Maurice Crum. So Mo Crum was good, but Abdel Banda was not. Your D-line was Ronald Talley, Justin Brown, and Brandon Nicholas. Not great. And your secondary was Treg Duerson, who was not a Division I football player. Junior Jabby, Leo Farine, Terrell Lambert, good football player, and Anthony Vernaglia. That was a pretty bad class. You had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 guys in that class that Rivals ranked as 2-star players. 2-star players, not specialists. That was the 04 class. And the 05 class, that Charlie was able to kind of somewhat rescue wasn't a great class either. You had David Grimes and DJ Horde, Joey Hyben at tight end, Asaph Schwab I liked. Evan Sharpley was not a big-time quarterback. He was not a Power 5 quarterback. He only had 2 offensive linemen, Michael Turkovich and Paul Duncan. At linebacker, you had Scott Smith, Steve Quinn, and Kevin Washington. At D-tackle, you had Darrell Hand, Patrick Kuntz. And in the secondary, you had Ray Herring, Kyle McCarthy, and David Bruton. A decent safety class. But, guys, those are 2 back-to-back classes at the University of Notre Dame. In that class, they had 2 2-star players. One of them, Asaph Schwab, who ended up being a decent player, Steve Quinn. According to Rivals, Notre Dame signed 2 4-star players in that class. That entire class of 15 commitments had 2 guys that Rivals ranked as 4-star players. Now, again, they're not the end-all, be-all, but with the exception of David Bruton, that's what most of those guys actually were. David Bruton ended up being played like a 4-star, but those guys, but then you'd say Joey Hyben was not, so you switch those 2 out. So, I mean, so you're talking about your junior and senior class was made up of terrible recruiting classes. So that hurt, number one. That was done before Charlie got there. Now, here's where Charlie Weiss, in my opinion, also had a role in his own downfall. Charlie's first 2 years were partly successful because as much as I dislike Tyrone Willingham in that era, the one thing I think that staff had is they had several just good, solid position coaches, not dynamic scheme guys and all that stuff, but guys that just knew how to, hey, let's stance and start. And, here's how the basics of playing college football. And I think that was good. And so when Charlie steps into the mix, you've got Brady Quinn's class, which was a really good class coming up as juniors. And that was the Quinn, Samardzija, Chinadum, class. I think Ryan Harris was part of that class. It was a really good class. But those guys all left after 2006 for the most part. And so then what happened was those guys were all kind of taught the basics of football. So then Charlie shows up and Charlie brings the scheme. They were taught the fundamentals and all that, but Charlie brings a scheme and some attitude. And of course, he had a great quarterback. And so really the big problem with Notre Dame during that stretch was they were great schematically, but eventually people kind of figured the scheme out. Even in 2006, they weren't nearly as dynamic as they were in 2005 because people had kind of figured Charlie's system out a little bit. So then you go into 2007, and you lost all those players. Samardzija's gone, Rama's gone, Brady's gone, Ryan Harris, is gone. I mean, you go through the whole list of all these players. That Victor Abiamiri is gone. I mean, they lose all these players. You have a couple guys coming back that were good players, but not a lot. You're starting a bunch of young kids. And the problem is the staff that Charlie had put together was pretty much an NFL staff, or it had people that just weren't great coaches on there. And there was no emphasis on fundamentals. I mean, Charlie's whole philosophy was scheme, 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 scheme. And the problem with that is you had all these young players that needed to be taught how to play the game. And they were never taught how to play the game. So what happened is the scheme wasn't such that you could just go out talent people anymore. The talent wasn't such that you could go out talent people anymore. The scheme didn't give you the same advantage that you thought it was going to give you before, because again, people had to read on you. And so then it came down to, are you able to play the game the right way? Well, you had inefficient talent or ineffective talent in older classes. So all your talent was in the freshman, sophomore classes. And then you kept adding talent onto that. But the problem is they didn't have a great strength conditioning program, but those kids didn't know how to play. So if you go back and look at all the close games that Notre Dame had, and I'm actually going to pull up their 2008 schedule, right? 2009 schedule, and just kind of go over this. So when you look at Notre Dame during that stretch, they lost so many close games. So they lost by 5 at North Carolina. They lost by 3 to Boston College. They lost by a point to Syracuse. So Notre Dame goes 7-6 that year. They lost to a 3-win Syracuse team. They lost in overtime to Pitt, and they lost to North Carolina on the road. They had a bunch of turnovers and mistakes in each of those games that proved them costly. So not playing the game the right way cost them games. Then you go into 2009. Similar situation. You lose by 4 in a game to Michigan, where you have just, give up a kick return. You have all these mistakes that lead to losses. You lose by 7 points to USC. You lose by 2 points at home to Navy. I believe that was the game. Vince, was Navy or UConn the game where Jimmy Clausen threw a pass off of Michael Floyd's back that got intercepted, right? Like, just the lack of communication there, like that kind of dumb stuff happened to them all the time. You lost by 2 points to Navy, 5 points at Pitt, 3 points to UConn, and they lost by a touchdown to Stanford. So Notre Dame goes 6-6 that year. They have a 4-point loss, a 7-point loss, a 2-point loss, a 5-point loss, a 3-point loss, and a 7-point loss. They didn't lose a single game by more than 7 points. And yet they were not a good team, because they also had they barely beat Boston College. They beat Washington in overtime. They had to remember, if you had to come back and beat Purdue, they beat Michigan State by 3. And the problem was those other teams were always coached better. And so Notre Dame was usually the team that made mistakes. And then some of those games that were close wins, they should have blown those teams out, but they didn't, because they were such a poorly coached football team from a fundamental standpoint that it just led to mistakes, penalties, turnovers, fumbles, blown coverages, things like that, that really kept them from coming close to maximizing their potential. And so, to me, that combination of not having great talent in the 04 and 05 classes, and just downright bad talent. I mean, in a 2-year span, 8 2-star players, and the last class had 2 4-star guys. You're now trying to win with a bunch of young kids who aren't being taught how to play the game. And I think that's the one thing that Brian Kelly did a decent job of early on, is, he brought in college coaches that, like Chuck Martins and the Bob Elliott's and Ed Warner's, and then of course replacing him with Harry Heastan and the Mike Dembrocks and the Tony Alfords and, guys like that early in his career. Mike Elson was a decent coach early in his career at Notre Dame. He got better as it went on, but he was at least decent early. You had Kerry Cooks eventually comes on. There was some good, solid, even a guy like Tim Hinton, who wasn't a great running backs coach by any stretch of imagination, could teach guys the right way to line up and play. And so you started see the team kind of get a little bit better, and then that led to obviously the 2012 success. So, and that was, a lot of that was driven by the recruiting that Charlie had done. I mean, if you think about the best players on the team, a lot of them were Charlie Weiss recruits. Both of your running backs, Sierra Wood and Theo Riddick, were Charlie Weiss recruits. Your best pass catcher was a Charlie Weiss recruit in Tyler Eifert. Your 2 stud linemen, actually 3 let's see, 4 of your starting linemen on that 2012 team were all Charlie Weiss recruits: Zach Martin, Chris Watt, Braxton Cave, and Mike Golick. Defensive line wise, Cap was a Charlie Weiss recruit. Lewis Nix was not a Charlie Weiss or Brian Kelly recruit. He was recruited by Tony Alford, and he committed to Notre Dame before Brian Kelly took over. You know, you look at I think Bennett Jackson was actually committed to Notre Dame to Charlie, but stayed on with the other staff. Same thing with TJ Jones, committed to Charlie, was never coached by Charlie, but committed to Charlie. Manti was a Charlie Weiss recruit. So you had a lot of guys. Zeke Mata was a Charlie Weiss recruit. So a bunch of your best players in 2012 were Charlie Weiss's recruits, and that's the one thing Charlie could do. But they had a better coaching staff, which helped prepare them to play better. So I think that is that to me is kind of what happened there. So that's a great question, and obviously I gave you a little bit of a long-winded answer, but hopefully it answers your question. Jordan Schreiber says, "Do you like Josh Burnham better as an end or linebacker?" I like him better as a linebacker because that's where I've seen him play. I haven't seen him play end, but we did talk about when they signed him that he could be a guy that outgrows the position and ends up being an edge player, and he's got some traits for that. He's 6'4". He's already over 230 pounds. We were told that he's going to be 250 by the time the fall starts. Strong hands, twitchy athleticism. So I think he fits the end position well. I just can't say that I like him better there because I've never seen him play that position. But, I mean, just a kid like that you find a place for. Connor O'Doherty asked this question. Connor, I would encourage you to go to the message board on this. We had about a week or two we were asked this question, and we had a long thread on it on the message board where I gave my team. For me, the fun part is we were asked this question in the past 2 different ways, and I think that got me 2 different starting lineups. One was my favorite players, and then the other one was the best players. And sometimes there's like carryover, like Brady Quinn's my quarterback for both. But when I do all time, I always do guys that I've seen. Like I can't put Leon Hart on an all-time team. I never saw him play. I can't put Jack Snow or Mark Bavaro or Alan Page or Ross Browner or Willie Fry or Luther Bradley or Nick Eddy or any of these guys on an all-time team because I never saw any of them play. So I always go with kind of my guys that I've seen in my time. And obviously like Brady Quinn's on there, and I've been back and forth on who the running back was. Jerome Bettis. I had Julius Jones, and I traded it to Reggie Brooks. But I would encourage you to check that out because I give a much longer answer there, and we kind of did debate about it. It was a lot of fun. Craig Doherty says, question, what home game this year is a must-see? Clemson. Definitely Clemson. There's no question about it. Connor O'Doherty also asked, what is you guys' most satisfying Notre Dame victory in your lifetime? Me being only 21. Oh, it's so sad. My few that come to mind are Clemson 2020. That was good. Oklahoma 2012 and USC 2017. So I'm blessed that I was old enough to remember the last time Notre Dame won a national championship. So that season provided the 2 most satisfying wins for me, 2 of the 3 most satisfying wins for me, probably of my lifetime. And that was the Miami win in '88, and then the championship game over West Virginia. So I got to watch both of those, and those were both satisfying. And then after that, it's the '93 game against Florida State. That was a pretty satisfying win because, again, that's back when it was like it was like 1 versus 2. It was the game of the century. All the talk was they're not going to be able to beat Florida State. There's too much speed on that side of the ball, all those kind of things. And Notre Dame came out and really took it to them and just kind of really reminded people that, like, hey, we're a pretty darn good program too. So that was a pretty fun time. But there's been others over the years. I mean, anytime you beat Michigan, it's a satisfying win. At least some of them have been kind of ugly, but some, like Rocket returning 2 kicks against Michigan, and it was at '89. That was pretty satisfying win. I remember watching that one. Anytime Notre Dame pounds Miami is always fun to kind of get into. So that's one that I enjoy as well. But trying to think of some of the more 17 had a couple satisfying wins. for the Kelly era. Obviously, the Oklahoma 2012 was a good one. Stanford 2012 was huge for me. I put Stanford 2012 over Oklahoma 2012 just because Stanford was a better team, and Stanford had dominated Notre Dame for the 4 to 5 previous years. So it was good to see that. But as far as like beating a top team, obviously the USC game was really good. That one I enjoyed. Very, very much. There's no question about it. Let's see here real quick. I want to try to get down to some more questions here. Jordan Schreiber says, do you like Notre Dame Stadium better now with the Jumbotron or better before that one? Definitely better with. Now, we could debate whether or not they need to use it better or different or whatever, and I would agree with that, but I definitely like it better having it. There's no doubt about it. Jordan also asked, are you guys going to do a get-together before the Ohio State game this year for Irish Breakdown members? That's a little bit too far in advance, and I still don't know. There's still some things I'm not sure of about that game and whether or not I'll be there for that. So we'll have an idea. I would like to do something like that before the game, whether it's the Friday night before or the day, like the morning of. That's a little too far out for me. And we'll probably do something tomorrow. There's some things going on. I may not be able to tailgate tomorrow. So what I may do is just kind of show up early and just find out where people are and try to meet you. But there's just some things going on in the Driscoll household that I got to get taken care of that may keep that from happening tomorrow. I'll let y'all know what the situation is with that. But stay tuned. Message board, Twitter. I'll make those things known on those. John A1 says, which defensive player from the Lou Holtz era would you add to the 2022 roster? That's an easy one. That's Chris Zorich. I'm sorry, Bryant Young. I would flat out add Bryant Young. Because he would be a nose tackle in this defense. That's the crazy thing. You put him up front at nose tackle with Jason Adamiola at 3 technique and Isaiah Foskey on the edge and I'm trying to think who some of the other ones. You've got Foskey, Justin Adamiola, Riley Mills, all those type of guys. That'd be a heck of a front seven. But then as soon as I started explaining that, I started thinking about, wait a minute, hold on a minute now. What about Todd Light at corner? That'd be another one that I would really, really want to think long and hard about. So those would be the two. It'd either be Bryant Young or Todd Light would be the two that I would most want to see if you could kind of, teleport them, to the modern era and be the college versions of themselves. Those would be the two that I would look at the most. Kay Grant with the super chat. Thank you very, 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 very much for that. Just got off work and want to stop by. Name one recruit on both sides of the ball you wish Notre Dame signed, please. Thanks, IB. Let's have a great weekend. I don't know what year you're referring to. I'm just going to assume that it's the 2023 class. So I think if I could say, boy, there's one recruit that I can guarantee that Notre Dame is going to get on both sides of the ball, one of them is already committed, and that's Kian Keely. I would, if I could make a, snap my finger and say that guy's going to sign with Notre Dame no matter what, Keon would be that guy. And offensively, it's Dante Moore. I mean, that would be the one for me. That would be, I mean, you get those two guys in this class, and that'd be pretty special. There's no doubt about that. No doubt about that. Let's get to some more questions here. Ethan O'Connor, it's a good one. I'm curious on the difference in style between Jade Mickey and Benjamin Morrison. Well, Jaden, they're little different body types. Benjamin is about an inch and a half, maybe 2 inches taller. He's a longer guy. He's more of a long speed kind of guy, physical hitter, more of a Cam Hart than he is a Tariq Bracy, right? If you're going to kind of go on that spectrum, but 6 foot 6'1" is what I've seen him listed as. Smooth. Jaden is more of a little more compact. He's got great feet. He's more in like the Julian Love type of athlete. Really quick foot, quick feet, really agile. I don't know, like on film in high school, he didn't show great speed. He had good speed, but from what we've heard, his speed in college has been better than they expected. Now, does that mean he's a burner or not? I don't know. Probably a little faster than Julian Love, but very similar type of player to what a Julian Love is because of the quickness. I think Jaden, however, is a lot stronger than Julian was at the same age and more capable of playing man coverage. I think that is definitely one that I would a guy that I would compare him to. So I think that's kind of how I break their games down. I'd say like Jaden is more of a field guy, Benjamin would be more of a boundary guy, but they can both do both, which means I really like the idea of being able to, play field boundary with those guys. Craig Doherty asked a question: how much of a learning curve for a new staff versus a staff together for a year or two? Well, I think it's the learning curve. I mean, there's the communication is not going to be quite as good in year one. One of the things about being an assistant for a coordinator head coach is over time you learn what they like. Okay, here's how he wants his breakdowns. Here's how he wants his film. Here's the ins and outs of what he wants to know first and foremost out of an opponent. Where early on you've got to kind of teach your staff that. You've got to, hey, this is what I want. This is how it goes. There's certain things you just learn. Jared Parker in 2 years is going to know a lot more about what Tommy Rees does or doesn't like than he does now. Tommy Rees is going to know a lot more about what Jared Parker likes or what Harry Heastan likes or whatever the case may be in the next couple of years as well. So I think those things are always important, and more time together, the better. But I don't think it's a debilitating thing. I don't think it's something that costs you games per se. I think it makes you even better, but it's not something where like, normally you'd beat BC, but because your staff hasn't been together, you're not going to. I don't think it's quite like that, but I definitely think it helps. There's no doubt about it. Mark Applegate said, you said that Drew has had a bad spring. What is he doing wrong? So things that I've been told just from different sources, he's turning the ball over a lot, just at times indecisive, just like, not really just doing the things that we know he's capable of, getting the ball out quickly, being accurate, showing good ball placement. Just hasn't been there with those things. He's been forcing things. I think he's, trying too hard, honestly, from what the sounds of it. Now, I can't tell you that firsthand because we haven't been at practices. But those are what consistently I've had sources kind of tell me that. Like he's turning the ball over a lot because he's forcing things or he's throwing late to something. And a lot of times the lateness can come from not being slow in your reads, but sometimes it can happen because you're going through your reads too quickly. So you go through too quickly and then you come back to something and then you throw it late and it ends up getting picked off. So those are the issues that I've seen so far. Juan says, who do you think is a better 2024 prospect between Sayin and Carr? So that'd be Julian Sayin and CJ Carr. I personally like CJ Carr better. I think CJ's a kid that I look at. I think he's got a better body. He's 6'3". He's gonna, 6'4". He's a big kid. He's not as mobile as Julian Sayin. Julian's kind of like a gunslinger. He is like what some people thought Ian Book was, gunslinger type, running around, scramble around, playmaker, that kind of thing. And I think that's kind of what Julian is. Whereas CJ's more of a prototype drop back quarterback with the, he's got a good arm now, but he's gonna be bigger. His arm's gonna get stronger. He's gonna be able to throw the deep ball better as he fills out and gets stronger. I think the upside there is a lot better, and the potential is just, I love the potential of CJ Carr, even though he's not a great player now. He's like a top 50 guy, but he's not like an elite 5-star yet. I do think there's a lot of tools to work with, and I like Julian a lot. Julian is a guy that maybe could come in early and run around and make plays, and I like Julian a lot. He's a top 100 guy. But I think CJ is just a better prospect. But at the end of the day, if you get either one, if you're able to still get Dante in 23 and then get one of those two guys in 24, it doesn't matter at that point in time. I mean, you're happy with both of them. And that's kind of where, where I'm at with that. So let me get down here to some more. Let's see here. Okay. Tyler Benge, coach, thoughts on bunch formation attack? It seemed like Notre Dame used that to success a few years ago, but not so much lately. Wide receiver tunnel screens or short screens to receivers with our speed and size. Look, I'm not a big bunch formation guy as a regular thing, and I don't think Notre Dame had success with it out of a normal thing in the past. I think they've used it well. Even last year, we saw them do it out of emotion and bang a quick post to Braden Lindsey for a touchdown against Stanford. I think bunch has its purpose, and Tommy Rees has used it, but to run a bunch effectively, you've got to have guys that can run. And I don't think they always had that on healthy and on the field at times last year. And I don't think that some of that bunch stuff, people think that it's quick developing. Some of that bunch stuff can be slower developing because you're running mesh concepts and vertical stretch concepts and things like that. That takes a little bit of time to get that readout. When you don't have an offensive line that you think can protect your quarterback for more than 2.5 seconds, some of that stuff doesn't really work. So I think that's kind of why you went away from it a little bit last year. But we'll see some of that stuff. But look, I'm a big believer, Tyler, in diversity from a scheme and a formational standpoint. I think the more different things that you do to just keep teams off balance, and that's the thing too, is like Notre Dame's not really a tempo team. And the frustrating thing for me, like from 05 to 18, 19, even recently, was not so much under Tommy. Chip Long was better about this, and Tommy's definitely been better about this at times, especially last year when he kind of had full control. You'd see Notre Dame like in 15 and 16 and in 14, they would kind of like line up in the same formation all the time. And whether in 12 personnel, they only had a couple things that they do. 11 personnel, they had a couple things they would do. And it was like in 2015, even I'd sit there like I pretty much know what's coming, because the way that the tight end was aligned based on how the back was aligned, either to a side or whether he was off center, like it was just like split with the quarterback or offset from the quarterback, you could kind of get an idea of what was coming. And they only ran counter out of certain ways. They only ran zone out of certain ways. And it was really easy to tell. And there was like no formational diversity whatsoever. And they just out-talented people. And so it really kind of made them pretty predictable in a lot of ways. And if you had decent talent, you could shut them down. And so I'm not a big fan of that. If you're going to be a pro style team that's not, you can do that in tempo because you're going so fast, teams can't throw a lot at you. If you're going to be a pro style drop back team, then, I think at that point in time, then you need to be able to mix things up and motions and shifts and different alignments and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes bunch is going to be a part of that. And so I think that's a really key ingredient to having an offense that can be successful in a pro style from a formational standpoint. I'm definitely a big believer in that. John A1 says, based on potential, are there any current players who have a chance to be selected number 1 overall in the NFL draft? Blake Fisher is one. I could see. I'm not predicting any of them to be number 1 because a lot has to go happen. But just guys that, if they pan out, could be that guy. I think Blake Fisher would be one. Joe Alt possibly could be one. Some of these, like some of them are like when was the last time a receiver went number 1? When was the last time a safety or a corner went number 1? When was the last time a linebacker went number 1? So really, the number 1 picks are, I'm actually going to look this up because there's a cool website that shows this. Let me see if they do it by pick. Let me see here. Pick in round. So first pick. So here's the first picks in the NFL draft. The last, let's go back to the last time a receiver was taken was in 1996, Keyshawn Johnson. Quarterback, this is the number 1 overall draft picks since then, between 1996 and now. So I'm going to start most recently. Quarterback, defensive end, quarterback, defensive end, offensive tackle, quarterback, tackle, quarterback, defensive end, quarterback, defensive end, quarterback, offensive tackle, Keyshawn Johnson, receiver, running back before that, D tackle before that. So you'd see a little bit more versatility back then. But so really you look at it and say, guys that have potential to be number 1, he's got to either be a quarterback, an offensive tackle, a defensive end. That's it. Literally from between now and 1996, since Keyshawn Johnson was taken, there has only been quarterbacks, defensive ends, offensive tackles taken with the number 1 overall pick. That's it. So, does Isaiah Foskey have potential to be a number 1 pick? Maybe. I think more top 10. Do I think Tyler Buckner could be a great college player? I do. Do I think that Tyler Buckner is a future number 1 overall pick type of player? I haven't seen that yet. And then offensive tackle would be the other one. So Joe Alt and Blake Fisher would be it. I mean, it doesn't matter. Michael Mayer could be the best player in college football next year. It's not going to be the number 1 pick in the draft. No one's going to draft a tight end number 1. I'm trying to think when the last time a tight end, if there ever has been a tight end taken number 1. I'm actually going to look that up. I'm currently down to 1953 when they changed, when positions were different, and I don't see that being number 1. It's mostly running backs, linebackers, defensive tackles, DNs, quarterbacks. So I haven't seen a tight end ever go number 1. So, again, that's the thing too, is you have to understand that there's only certain positions that can be number 1 based on how the NFL is. But it's a really good question, John. I appreciate that. Jacob Mears just joined the message board as an annual member last night. Welcome aboard. Love every bit of it, Jacob. Thank you. Thank you so much for signing up and that testimonial. Hopefully we can get more people to sign up for that. There's no doubt about that. Conley Ellis, which former player are you guys most excited to see this weekend at the Blue Gold game? I honestly, Conley, that's a good question. I haven't really thought about that. I don't really think too much about that. Trying to think of, I don't know, whatever player would have the biggest impact on whatever recruits are on campus. So I don't really know. I mean, maybe Harrison Smith can show up, and I don't know if he's going to be on campus or not. Maybe he shows up and has a little heart-to-heart with Caleb Downs. I mean, maybe that's it. Maybe Stephon Tuitt or Alan Page, or trying to think, some Bryant Young, maybe some great former defensive linemen can be on campus and have a little heart-to-heart with Kian Keely. That's about it. I don't think I'll really see – the only former player I'll probably see this weekend is Oscar McBride, because he's a friend of mine, but I don't anticipate seeing any of the other former players personally. But, yeah, I really hadn't thought about that. That's a good question. I like where your head's at. I just don't I don't really have a good answer for that one. I really don't. And if there's someone that's got some stuff working on with the NIL stuff, I'd certainly obviously be happy to see those guys on campus and hear what they're doing. Ticey says, Brian, after the NIL collective fund was announced, I think you said there was more in the works. Was the NBC announcement it, or is there more NIL things to come? The NBC announcement was not something that I was referring to. I can't really get into a whole lot of it. It's just I know that there's other former players that have been very successful in life, that are in business, that are working on trying to find ways to allow Notre Dame to be competitive in that sphere. But again, you have to understand, Notre Dame is never going to be a, hey, quarterback recruit, here's a guaranteed this. There's always going to have to be players willing to bet on themselves. That's just the reality of it. And players have always done that, and they will continue to do that, because there's always going to be guys that are like that are great players. So I've heard there's more. Now, we'll see. Those things there's a lot that has to happen, right? Like, y'all got to understand, there's a lot there's rules, there's regulations, there's certain things like Brady Quinn. And I got to get that article up later today with some of the quotes from him. I was thinking about hanging on to it until next week, so we can kind of have a further discussion and we don't have the Blue Gold game to worry about. But, it's one of the things is Brady said that they started working on this on like January 19th and didn't announce it till almost 3 months later, because there's a lot of stuff that goes into it. There's the 501c stuff. There's trying to understand the rules, how can you make it work? And, what type of, business partners can you have? You can't just like wake up one day, like, you know what? I think I'm going to run a thing for NIL and do it at Notre Dame. What other people are doing is just, here's a check for $10 million, right? I mean, and I don't know if it's that much, but they're writing big checks, and that's what they're doing. And that's not what's going to work at Notre Dame. And Notre Dame has to find a different way to make it work, and that's what takes a little bit longer, in my opinion, to kind of play out. So I think that's why it's taking a little bit longer. But as I've said all along, Notre Dame's going to be fine with NIL, right? And kids who are looking for automatic paychecks are never going to come to Notre Dame. But those kids were already looking for automatic paychecks before, and they were still going to go somewhere else where they were going to get an automatic paycheck. Now it's just a bigger paycheck, but that's just kind of been the reality of it. So I think people need to understand that's part of the deal, right? But it's always been part of the deal, which I've said Notre Dame will be fine when it comes to NIL when all this stuff ends up getting played out. Jacob Watson says, "Are you big on Sam Pendleton?" So Sam Pendleton is the 2023 recruit from North Carolina. He will be making his announcement at 6:30 on Monday. We will carry that live. And he is going to do it on Instagram. He's going to choose between Notre Dame, Michigan, Florida, and I think NC State. I think it was the 4. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head that he's going to choose between. And am I big on him? I think he's a good player. He's kind of he's one of those guys that had to grow on me a little bit, and sometimes that happens with offensive linemen because he's listed at 6'4", 305. I don't know if he's quite that big. He doesn't look big on film, but then you see him kind of standing next to Harry Heastan, and I know how big Harry Heastan is. And then he's like, okay, that kid's a lot bigger than him, so maybe he is 6'4". I don't know if he's 305 or not yet, but here's the thing I like about him. He's got some of the strongest hands in the entire class, in the country. I'm talking not just Notre Dame class, because he's not in it. I'm talking the entire offensive line class. He's got very, very heavy hands, very big. Like, I don't know if they're big, but they're strong. He's got some serious punch. You know, he hits guys and they go back. And I really think he brings some toughness and physicality to the question. I think it's a thing where, you know, he is someone who moves well. He's not an elite athlete, but he moves well. He's a guy that I think plays with pretty decent technique at his age, which I like, and just a guy that I think fits a lot of what Harry Heastan's looking for. They're recruiting him as a guard. I personally really like him as a potential center as well. Obviously, I like him as a guard, but I really like him as center because he's got nice feet, relatively loose hips, but those hands, like I just see him snapping the ball and then being able to step with power on his one hand. Because center almost always has to begin a play one-handed before he snaps and then brings that other hand. So you need a center ideally that's got either superior athleticism or a guy that's got some serious punch. And I think Sam Pendleton is a guy that in my opinion has some serious punch, like some serious punch. And I definitely dig that very, very much. All right. K Grant says, and adding on to his previous super chat, thank you for that. Any recruit any year in the past that didn't sign, it's okay. Poor wording on my part. No worries. All right, let me think about that one. Man, boy, there'd be so many. I don't like, and I want to go like somebody Notre Dame actually had a chance with. Boy, that's a really good question. You know what, Keg? I know that you're on the message board, so can you do me a favor and put that on the message board? Because I'd have to really think about that one. Like, you know, I mean, because like, how technical do you want to get, right? Because you say didn't sign. Well, Notre Dame signed Randy Moss. He just didn't make it. So, like, I mean, that's obviously my first thought. But you said sign. So who would I want that they didn't sign? I'd have to really, really think about that. And now, here's one on defense that, and I'm not sure what year it was, but I was told that by several people that Javon Curse, if you remember him that went to Florida, wanted to sign with Notre Dame, but they gave the last scholarship they had to an offensive lineman that never really played, and they told Javon Curse they didn't have room. That would have been really interesting to see him playing at Notre Dame. But obviously it didn't work out that way. But I'd have to think about that. So if you maybe throw that on the message board, and I'd like to have some time to think about that one, to be honest with you. I'd like some time to think about that one. Let me see here real quick. Chris Basker with a super chat, and he asks, update your over-under for April commits. I mean, right now I can only confidently say 3 for April. A couple guys that I thought were going to pop in April, I now project to go in May. So the timing is going to be different, but nobody that I predicted last month when we set the over under at 5.5 to have a little bit of fun, nobody that I know of that was part of my potential this guy could pop has changed his stance with Notre Dame. They're still in the same place they were. It's just a timing thing. So like Charles Jagusa, I still feel really good about where they stand with him. It's just the timing of it. That's the only thing that's different. Some of the other guys that I had on my predictions list, it's Dante Moore. My confidence in him hasn't changed. It's just the timing of it. So the only guy that I thought Notre Dame had a good shot with that has changed since we talked about that's Cardinal Tate. I just don't see that one happening at this point in time. Jim Evans says, please give a shout out to former Notre Dame quarterback Darryl LaMonica, who passed away yesterday, I believe, at the age of 80. An AFL icon who would have been a world beater with the Irish had he been with better teams and had better coaching. So yes, I appreciate that, Jim. I appreciate you saying that, and of course, a guy that is certainly a big name for Notre Dame players. That he played with the Raiders. I'm trying to remember. That was obviously a little bit before my time on that one. Let me see here. Some more questions. Chad W. I mean, I think I've since blocked him, but do you think you will get in the playoff with one loss? Yes, Notre Dame has been in the playoff before, one loss. They could get in again with one loss. If they have one loss this year, they will be in the playoff. And I think I have since kicked him out of the chat, so won't answer any more of his questions. But it was starred, so I answered it. Drew St. Blaise, Vince down there giving us I didn't know. Drew St. Blaise with a $5 super chat. Just wanted to send love from South Bend. Miss y'all. What are the protocols for the blue and gold game tailgating? I don't know of any protocols, Drew, honestly, other than what they've had before. I really don't. It's been a while since I've never been to a spring game tailgate before, so I'm not quite sure how that goes. And yeah, I really don't have. I don't really have a good answer for you on that. Vince, do you?
Parking is first come, first serve.
Okay.
And if you want to tailgate, they're not going to stop you.
Okay.
It's not at all like what it is in a normal situation.
Okay. So in the fall, you can tailgate, right? But there's I think they had that too. Then they tailgated this year, but obviously they had gotten rid of it before. So yeah, that is that. Let me see, Vince. Are you still going through trying to find some starred ones here? I got a couple. We're running out of them here. Get down here. Last couple we'll get to. M. Sleep asks, this is a good one. Coach, do you think Braylon James compares to Kevin Austin coming out of high school? We got asked this one the other day, and I think that's a decent comp. I think Kevin was a thicker kid at the time. I think that Braylon has more speed than Kevin had. Kevin was stronger. Kevin was more powerful than Braylon is at the same age. I think Braylon is a more smooth athlete. I think he's more explosive than Kevin was the same age. Kevin was bigger and stronger. So very similar players. I would probably rank Braylon a little bit ahead of Kevin at the same age. Now we'll see if they pan out. But remember, Kevin was a good player as a junior. I liked him as a junior. He had a jump as a senior. He got better as a senior, but at the same age. So just going off both of their junior films, I would say that that Kevin was the better player. And this is the last one, Vince. I don't know if there's more down there, but this is the last one I have. I said, hey, Coach, why aren't more people talking about Malik Elzy getting solid Midwest Chicago kids is important for long-term success? He's a good athlete with length, good hands, solid speed. I think you kind of answered the question for me there, DL Call 01. He's a solid prospect. And the reality is Notre Dame gets solid prospects all the time. If Notre Dame is going to close the gap on the best teams in the country, they need better than just solid prospects. And I just don't see it being a situation where he adds a ton of value to what you do. I mean, he's a good player. He'd give you depth. He's a nice player that I think can help out in some ways. But when I look at Malik Elzy, he's a good player. If he ends up in the class, I'll have no problem with that. He's a 4-star, top 250 caliber player. No problem with that. But at some point in time, Notre Dame has to start landing more big-time players. And when I say top 100 or top 250, I'm talking about my grade for a kid. I don't care what other people have. I'm talking about how I view a kid. And to me, they need more Braylon Jameses. They need more Ronan Hannafins. They need more Rodney Gallaghers. They need more Cardinal Tates. They need more Tyler Williamses. They need more, of the Mizell kid that they just kind of landed. So I think to me, those are the kind of guys that I think that you need more of if you're going to close the gap. The reality is Notre Dame has been getting kids like Malik Elzy for years. And while a good player, he helps you go 10-2 every year. What we've seen of Malik is that, for me, it's just my opinion. Other people disagree with me on this, and that's totally fine. But good athlete, agree. Length, agree. Good hands, agree. Solid speed, agree. Two-way player, good player. It's just, does landing him move the needle and close on him? I just don't think it does. And so I think I would imagine that's why a lot of people aren't necessarily talking about him in regards to, being that kind of top player, because we see what you see. Good player, good length, solid speed, good hands. But that's not the kind of game changer that I think Notre Dame fans recognize that they need if they're going to really take that next step as a program. And that's where they're at. So that is I believe that's gonna do it. Let me just go down here and make sure there aren't any more super chats that I missed. Otherwise, we're gonna wrap up here and get out of here. So that is going to do it for today's show. So, hey, everybody, I appreciate you being with us today. Before you leave, let me take this one down here real quick. Here, actually, we got one here from 99 Problems BK1. Brian, if all goes well this weekend with Gallagher and Greathouse's visits, what are realistic expectations going forward with their recruitments? Would either move up timelines if it went great? I don't think. I mean, here's the thing. We don't really know until the visit goes great. And what I mean by that is right now, both have very, very clear plans of this recruitment going forward and taking officials and doing all that. Same with Monroe Freeling. He flat out, he's already got official visits. His Notre Dame official visit is already scheduled, right? He plans on taking officials. That's the plan. So right now, all I can go with is that plan. Now, if the visit goes great, some kids, the visit goes great and just makes Notre Dame a top contender. With other kids, the visit goes great, and they're like, I'm done. I'm wrapping it up. I can't predict that that's going to be the case with them. I do believe Notre Dame will definitely get one commitment this weekend publicly. I believe that. And here's the other thing, too. If one of those guys did want to move up their timeline, let's say one of those two guys committed to Notre Dame this weekend, it would be a silent, and it would not happen for a little bit. So we won't know, right? Because most people in this business that I know of, like, that other Notre Dame sites, most of the ones, at least the ones that I respect, they'll find out either same time, after me, whatever, but they'll find out that Notre Dame has a silent commit. And most of them are going to be pretty good about not putting it out there, and I think that's going to be a big part of how it goes. Is they may silent commit, but we're not going to know about it, right? So what we know about the recruitments, I don't think it'll change their timelines. I don't. Could it change it? Sure, it could. We just don't know. And so I think that's the key there is I think the focus should be with guys like them who've never visited before, who plan on coming back. It's not so much can the visit be so good that it changes their timeline, but can the visit be so good that you become the team to beat? And put yourself either in position to be the team to beat or put yourself within striking distance of the team to beat. I think those are the things to me that are more realistic and more likely when talking about those type of players who are big time recruits that a lot of big time schools are going after. And I think that would be the key. So that's my answer to that. And that's a great question. That's a great way to end. As always, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, subscribe to our podcast, share our podcast. All those things help us to continue to get in front of more of a greater audience and make sure that more and more people are seeing us, which helps us grow. If you are listening via podcast, please give us a 5-star review. We would greatly appreciate that. Sign up for the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Yo, merch store, get in there, check stuff out. Buy stuff, help support our business in that regards. If you are looking for the best protein bar in the business, Built Bar is it. I promise you. I just got a new one recently. Here it is caramel brownie. It is now in my top 5. I'm not sure which one it is replaced, but it's in my top 5. If you sign up if you buy Built Bars and you use the promo code Irish Breakdown, you get 10% off your entire purchase. So a lot going on, but just as May say, Kay says, we'll leave you with this. He says it better than me anyway. join the message board, smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, and leave a 5-star review. And as he always ends it, go Irish. Thank you all so much for being a part of the Irish Breakdown podcast.